The regulars kept their word and the camp settled down to normal. A month after the fight, the C.C.C camp was suddenly disbanded. We were given the choice of being transferred into the service of our choice, or being discharged. I chose to be discharged, and that was the last I ever saw of anyone I served with in the camp. Mother greeted me warmly upon my return home, but it was a so-so welcome by my stepfather. I had changed physically and mentally in the year I was gone, and Bond must have sensed I would no longer tolerate any more of his abuse. I looked up a few of my old associates and friends around the neighborhood, but soon discovered it wasn't the same with us. My first reaction was that they had changed, but it was me who outgrown them, and the streets. I was an innocent-looking 15 going on 35, which was really too bizarre for most people to deal with. I felt exactly like Oscar Wilde's Dorian Gray. This feeling would remain with me for the rest of my life. Orada's was still the same, and the old bunch were glad to see me back. Frank asked if I needed anything, and I said it would be appreciated if he would allow me to hang around until my mind was made up on what I wanted to do. He offered to put me back on the payroll, but I wanted to be free to come and go, and said I would be satisfied with whatever I could earn during the time I was there. That was fine with him, and he reminded me he was still holding close to $3,000 I had not touched since Eddie's death. Explaining I had come out of the seas with a little bankroll from gambling and payday loan sharking, so would be okay for a while. He smiled, shook his head, and walked away. I told Emery, Frank's colored ex-jockey overseer with whom I had worked before, of my new arrangement with Frank in order to verify it wouldn't conflict with anything he had going. He assured me there was no problem and suggested we share the wealth as before, mentioning some hot inside betting action available once in a while if I was interested. Appreciating his offer, I told him to toss my name in the pot whenever he had something good. I hung out at Orada's for 2 months or so before I decided to try something straight. Carl Davies, a supposedly good friend of mine, worked at a woman's wholesale shoe house called Shoe Styles. He could get me an easy job working with him, which would be fun. Being ready for any kind of change, his offer was accepted. He sent me to see his boss, Ray Adams, who hired me as a stock boy for 45 cents an hour. I almost laughed in his face knowing I had walked around money in my pocket that was equivalent to 3 months' pay. The job was unloading and unpacking cases of shoes containing 36 pairs per case and placing them in their proper numbered bins. After working in a rock quarry, these cases were as light as feathers. 2 weeks into the job, Ray appointed me inventory controller, with a raise to 60 cents an hour. I was responsible for checking all shipments coming and going, making sure the models and amounts corresponded with the manifest. Carl suggested we steal some saddle Oxfords, which were very popular, and resell them to a retailer he knew. I told him to forget it because I wasn't taking any chances of going to the slammer for something stupid like stealing shoes, unless we could get away with a trainload. Soon after rejecting his proposition, he blew his top and his job. He and some other stock boys were unloading a truck while I was checking off their loads as they brought them in. Carl didn't appreciate this, and demanded Ray assign me to help them unload rather than just walking around with a clipboard. Ray told him to take a walk if he didn't like it. Carl waited until the next Friday morning to be paid in full for the week. After cashing his check, he stiffed them for a half-day's work by not returning. The next time I saw Carl, he was wearing a pair of women's saddle Oxfords, and boasting how he beat them out of a half-day's pay, plus a pair of shoes. I commented on how lucky he and his feet were to be so small. A few days after Carl quit, Ray told me he would have hired me in spite of Carl advising him against it. I was flabbergasted because Carl had suggested I apply for the job in the first place. The only reason for this double dealing must have been petty jealousy, and he wanted to pass it along to the neighborhood that his company had rejected me. Carl's job was taken by a nice guy named Bob Kirk, who came from a wealthy suburban family. We hit it off and became friends. He was working during his school vacation for extra money, and returning to college in the fall. Like me, he really didn't need the job. During one of our lunch breaks, he showed me some pictures of his girlfriend. In one of the pictures was another very attractive girl whom Bob identified as his sister, Elizabeth. I jokingly suggested he should arrange for her and his girl to meet us after work sometime for dinner. That following Friday, about quitting time, I was on my way downstairs to the office when Bob asked me to see if they had arrived yet. I asked to whom he was referring, and he replied his girlfriend and sister. Trying not to look stunned, I said, of course, who else? I always came to work nicely dressed because I usually joined friends after work for a drink or two at the 7 to 11 lounge nearby. I kept old work clothes on the job, so this sudden, unexpected dinner date didn't catch me in what could have been an embarrassing, unpresentable condition. I was far from prepared in my mental attitude. Here was a highly educated 21-year-old society girl expecting a reasonable escort. The situation seemed ludicrous. Here I was, a street kid just turned 16, whose only close personal relationships, since my seduction at 11, were limited to two 15-year-old girls from working-class families. My other experiences were the many casual wham-wham, thank you ma'am type of sex I received from grateful neighborhood wives for advancing them small cash loans. Talk about stage fright. My first reaction was to kick Bob in the ass for taking me seriously, and then run out the back door. When I walked into the office, I spotted the girls from Bob's pictures. Bob's sister had class written all over her. For the first and last time in my life, I felt intimidated by a female. I went back upstairs and told Bob the girls were waiting, so we had better wash up and get dressed. I paid extra special attention to my appearance because I thought this could be a crucial experience. I was stepping up in age and class, but it was the age that concerned me the most. I had told Bob I was 19, but the face looking back at me from the mirror was that of a curly blonde, blue-eyed boy, not possibly over 15. Oh, how I would have settled for just looking at my 16 years. While we were on our way to meet the girls, a change came over me. I no longer felt ill at ease or in the least bit constrained. In fact, everything seemed the opposite. I was cool, confident, and couldn't care less what the hell anyone thought. This transformation had occurred a few times before, and always in moments of extreme stress or reluctance. Many years later, I became acutely aware that I had another totally different personality, which was activated only when I encountered aggravating or dangerous situations. After introductions, we decided on where we would eat. The restaurant we selected was only a 3-block walk from work, and this gave Elizabeth and me a chance to talk and become better acquainted. By the time we arrived, Betty, as she preferred to be called, and I were completely relaxed and enjoying one another's company. She was a warm, sweet person, completely without guile or pretense. After a pleasant dinner, Bob and his girl left to do some shopping. Betty and I decided to take in a movie and then have coffee and a dessert after. I saw her home via 2 streetcars. We started dating, and although Betty professed a strong feeling of love on her part, I never got beyond the liking stage. I was way too young and interested in developing myself to become involved with detours of any kind. When I met Betty, she had just graduated from Washington University and mentioned she was somewhat engaged to a fellow classmate. I met this Bill, a tall, good-looking football hero from a wealthy family, at a party we had attended. After we looked each other over, we both came to the same conclusion of, what the hell did she see in me? I would determine that sometimes a female's head and hips are in a constant conflict of communication with each other. Betty invited me to her home one evening to meet her family. I didn't appreciate the invitation because I found I had nothing in common with her friends, so naturally this perception carried over to her family. The friendship I enjoyed with her brother soon chilled, when it dawned on him I had something serious going with his sister, and from his attitude, felt it reasonable to expect hostility when meeting the rest of the family.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to our channel and like our videos or leave a valuable comment. We appreciate wholeheartedly.